If I may, Mr. Dillon,
Yes, sir.
I'm actually glad that you mentioned global economy because, like Mr. Alcott, I too had been afforded the opportunity to travel through Asia to look at what's being done there. And it's clear that there are a lot of things that we can do here much better. But I was curious from the private sector standpoint, what value would you see in not only providing the access in a holistic way, but providing it in particular to communities that are essentially or really regarded as underserved. Certainly in parts of New York City, we can readily say, okay, these communities are connected, and obviously there's a socioeconomic fiber there that supports that in the way things are rolled out. But my question is really around it from the private sector. What do you see as the value to connect into the underserved communities, if there is a business value that you see?
Well, there's a huge value. It's an untapped market, not only from a standpoint of the local human capital and the contribution they can make. Fundamentally, you have this situation, and particularly in a city of this size. The cure for cancer could be roaming around out here in your streets. Now, whether that particular mind ends up on the back of a garbage truck or ends up in a hospital or in a research lab is one of those things that bridging this can help to accomplish through the exposure. That is the general belief. And so as you go through and look at this, that digital divide issue is broader than any one thing. It's not just about whether or not you can get the kids away from the wall of the library. It's also about whether or not the support for the household has to make 3 or 4 different trains in order to get to where they have to go across town, and therefore cannot be there and cannot assist. It's systemic and it's holistic. Entire family structures, entire businesses that go clear through. We look at it at IBM in our own workforce and the mobility we have. Probably 80% of IBMers work from home, work remote. We're most frequently going to be on a train or in a remote building or someone else's office doing what we do. And we've been doing that for well over a decade. So we've got a lot of practical experience in working with that as well. But what we do understand about that is that the digital divide issue has to be digital inclusion. Digital divide will be handled, we talk about it in terms of education and getting to the minds of those kids and getting them access to the internet, but it's also about mom and dad and the grandparents as well. If you don't fix all of it, and if you don't avail the community as a whole to that, you won't have the base necessary in order to attract the vendors who can actually do this for you. That goes back to that economy of scales. Large city, lots of constituents, you need to bring them to the table. So you're probably going to need to be a little more multifaceted in what your focus is in order to attract the right size vendors so you can get this done. I hope that answered your question. It's a little circuitous.
It does, but it raises one additional question. It raises one additional question, which is, what are some specific things that we can do to kind of make that happen? Because you speak globally about things that are, as you, I think you indicated, they sound nice in theory, but then they fall off the table when it's negotiation time. But more importantly, what are the specific things that we might be able to do to realize what you're talking about?
Well, the first and foremost, the word that comes to mind is commitment. If we've struggled, and I'm talking now as an industry, if we've struggled with one thing in the last 3 years, it's been commitment. New York City made a commitment when they set out to do their public safety network. What happened when Philadelphia occurred was the commitment went out of things. All of a sudden it was, we're going to take an issue as critical and sensitive as the minds and capabilities and you know, unfettered potential of these kids, and we are going to leave that in the hands of the vendor community. And the vendor community comes in and says, well, you know what, we're about making a buck. Bottom line, right here on Wall Street, we're about making a buck. And under the microscope of Wall Street, we make smart business decisions. Somewhere between those two things, the need for profit and the public benefit that can be had by the community, is what you're really trying to bridge. The business model, therefore, becomes key. You put the business model together, and as I said before, the city's comprehensive plan, if it makes sense. If the city is not saying to a vendor, hey, you come in here, we want you to float this on your shoulders, we want to make no commitment, we're not reaching in our pocket, come in here and make a buck, you leave them nowhere to turn other than ads and phishing and other things that may come to the community as a result of it. I think all of us remember some of the early free internet services where you're just bombarded with ads. Can't necessarily use it in that way. So you really want to have a comprehensive model that enables you to have the quality of service and the controls at the end of the day that will let you complete your purpose in your way. You don't want to relinquish the control, and the way to do that is to make the commitment, financial commitment and also long-term political commitment.
The last question for Mr. Dillon from Andrew Richet.
Yeah. Thank you for letting me go over the 3 questions you said that we should do before. Michael, New York City is about to embark on spending about $500 million building a public safety network using Wi-Fi.
Yep.
From your perspective, being technologically more aware of the actual use of the technologies, do you see any reason why that network couldn't be made also available to the public and still be made secure for the police and fire department in such a way as to satisfy their concerns that they would be sharing a network with the public?
The answer is it depends, and that is on something that we call quality of service. Generally speaking, and I'll point you towards Grand Rapids, Michigan. Take a look at Grand Rapids, Michigan, not for the participants there, but for what they did and said. Public safety came onto a public network, kind of in the inverse. They agreed to use a public access network that was designed for the community to have internet access and to run non-critical police services and the things that you would hope to do with this network in the excess capacity. The reason they did it is because of the quality of service associated with the technology WiMAX. Wi-Fi, on the other hand, does not necessarily have all the same tools. It is not believed to have the same provisioning capabilities, arguably. And so where you really have to come to is a place where you say, if we take the Wi-Fi network and if we could adequately provision it, secure the data that the police department's using, in essence give them their own discrete pipe, could we use excess capacity to do that? The answer is maybe. You have to do the analysis on it and take a look. Got to know the tools involved, got to know the technologies involved, and have to look at what solutions are coming out that were not here yesterday.
Thank you, Mr. Dillon.
You're welcome. Thank you.